Hi, I'm Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, the show where we share the powerful stories of people with disabilities and daring entrepreneurs making waves in our world. From technological innovations to best practices in business, we'll learn what it really means to live in an inclusive and universally designed environment. Hello and welcome. This is Mobility and Inclusion. I am Harut Markarian, and my guest today is the award-winning actress, motivational speaker, writer, and comedian, Dawn Grabowski. Dawn has written, produced, performed, and presented Always Going Up. She is the past winner of the Christopher Reeves Acting Scholarship Competition. Dawn received her first big break in 1996 when she appeared in the movie Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise. In 2009, Dawn received the Red Carpet Award from Women in Theater. And without any further ado, I want to welcome Dawn Grabowski.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dawn, thank you for accepting my invitation and being with me on Mobility and Inclusion. Welcome. I want to open up with, I saw an interesting thing on your website that says you earned a degree in theater arts and paralegal studies. Now, this kind of like, and I'm not an actor or I'm not an actor. I have nothing to do with that industry. But if I think about theater arts and paralegal studies, there's kind of like don't mesh in my brain. I don't know how is that. Can you please explain that?
Well, it was kind of an evolution. My Bachelor of Arts is the first one was in theater arts because my passion has always been acting and was theater before I came to California. I had no film experience before I came to California to pursue my film and television dreams. But what had happened was, as life progresses, as it does, I wanted to try to get myself more financially stable. And the people that I knew that had disabilities were doing well as disability advocates in the legal profession, or they were computer people. I'm not a tech person. It's been quite a challenge sheltering at home, trying to figure out my own studio and my own lights, and just setting up for this interview has been a little bit of a challenge because technically that's not where my head is at. And I've always been a disability advocate. It's very rewarding work, but it doesn't pay well. So my thought process at the time was, if I go back to school and get a paralegal degree because I have a disability, most people wouldn't give me a shot in a new field. So I felt like if I got a paralegal degree, so now I have a Bachelor of Science in Paralegal Studies, I could get a job in a small production company and meld my two worlds together. Unfortunately, that never happened. As a person with a disability, it's very hard to get a day job. So I have a lot of technical and theoretical experience when it comes to paralegal studies, but I don't have any practical experience in the working world, for lack of better words. So it was kind of an evolution of how that happened. But the thought process was, I'm going to get myself more financially stable, and I could work part-time at a production company a couple days a week, still pursue my acting and my comedy dreams and all my artistic dreams, and be off the system, the disability system, and be doing a little bit better financially. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, but hey, knowledge is power. So I do have a little more knowledge when I read my theatrical contracts. When I book jobs, I have a little more sense what they're talking about in the contract. So it was a win-win any way you look at it.
It sounds like a win-win, but you said two things that kind of disrupted my thinking process right now. You said it's hard to get a job when for a day job for people with disabilities, right? I wanna.
It's hard to get a job, period, if you have a disability that's visible.
Yeah, well, I want to focus on that a little bit, and then you said people with disabilities don't earn as much, correct?
in the working, if you're in the system, if you have a disability check, everyone I know that gets a disability check lives below the poverty level.
Wow. Okay. Those. So we can. Now I had a set of questions prepared for you. Now you disrupted that.
I'm
But
sorry.
it's okay. It's okay. This is good though. This is good. Now let's talk about an experience you had where you applied for a regular job, and because of your external apparent disability, as you put it, you weren't able to get it.
Yep. A lot of times my experience has been when I go in to walk in on my crutches or go into my wheel with my wheelchair. A lot of times my experience in the past has been they don't even give me an application. They come up with an excuse not to give me the application. And I've written, I'm also a sit down comic because I'm not qualified to stand. So I've written routines about this because I feel like the way to educate people is through humor. Because if you can make them laugh, you can, it's a wonderful thing. But if you can make them laugh and think about it after the set is over and after they leave the comedy club or shut off the camera for the Zoom comedy, you've done more for at least that's the way I look at it with my career and putting myself out there and myself forward.
I truly agree with that. I think humor is a great way of delivering a message. That's
Absolutely.
great. It still doesn't, you know, doesn't cover up the fact that you didn't even receive an application when you walk into a job, a potential job, potential opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I created mobility and inclusion, which is why we're trying to change that perception and stigma. Um, Now let's move on from this topic. You've been a co-star in SWAT on CBS, and the Bad Girls Guide on UPN, and the guest star in ER on NBC. What was your experience playing these roles?
They were wonderful experiences. Go working backwards a little bit. SWAT was the most recent uh, theatrical experience I had, and that was very exciting because that was the first time that I was hired, and it had nothing to do with my disability. They were just open to diversity, and I happened to be right for the role, and they were willing. They didn't care that I was a secretary that walked with crutches. So
That's
that was
awesome.
very exciting because normally you're the woman in the wheelchair, or you're the lady on crutches, or you're the disabled character, and you usually don't even have a name. So
Mhm.
it was very exciting to have to be Susan, the secretary. And there was no mention of my disability at all. It was not even part of the dialogue or anything like that.
And it should and it shouldn't be, because we're gonna come back, and I don't want to continue with my thought here because my next question is gonna hit on what you just said, and that's you know I want to talk about your philosophy of looking beyond the packaging, which I think dovetails in a nice way into what you were just saying.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're all human beings. We all have blood in our veins. I just walk in a room a little bit differently, or, sometimes I roll in a room. It depends on the day and where I'm going and how I'm feeling that day. So it's just a matter of, yeah, I don't look like what Hollywood, quote unquote, says typically a leading lady is supposed to look like, but myself and others are trying to change that because we want to see more of the American scene, and we want to see different cultures and different diversity all over because it's 2021. It's time.
Yep,
It's more than
absolutely.
time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Diversity is important, and unfortunately, a lot of times when diversity is mentioned, we mention colors. We forget that there are other types of diversity that are equally important, and we should embrace it. Um,
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned you were a sit-down comic. Uh, like, how did you stumble on being a comic?
That's another thing of evolution. I constantly as you will realize in life, I feel in life as well as the entertainment industry, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And you always have to figure out ways to reinvent yourself because, especially with technology now, there are so many opportunities. The more you can, you know, yes, I'm an actor and that's my passion, but I've also written and I've also produced and I've also created content. And so it was just at a point in my life where I needed some laughter and I needed some good things to happen. And I stumbled across a comedy class on a Groupon back when they used to have Groupons. And I went for a weekend seminar, and the weekend seminar turned into 7 years later of learning how to tell jokes about my situation. And I'm kind of a comic that tells stories and is more of an more of a storyteller comic as opposed to an observational comic.
Yeah, no, that's great. I actually watched a little bit of your comedy on your website, and the one when the presenter. I don't know if that was done by intention. The presenter said it's going to take her a while to get on stage, and then you walk in with crutches, and then you sit down and you say, "That's all, folks. That's me for tonight." Right? That was pretty funny.
Well,
But
when you start out, as you start out and you're considered a beginner comic, you usually get 3 minutes tops.
oh,
So
I
it
see.
takes me longer than that to get on the stage. So that's why I say that's my time, folks, because it takes longer than 3 minutes for me to get on the stage because most comedy clubs, as most buildings, are not accessible.
Yeah, yeah.
So it takes a lot of effort.
Well, that's another thing we discuss a lot in on mobility and inclusion. Accessibility is one of the key topics, and something that we want to educate people on, and hopefully influence a change. Now, you said, if you're taking a disability check, you're living beyond the poverty line.
Below.
Uh, Sorry, English is
I
my
wish it was beyond, but it's
Yeah,
below.
sorry. Well, I wish that was the case as well. But English
Yeah,
being my fourth language, sometimes I think in different languages till I get to the English version of it. So it takes a
absolutely.
different
I
different
understand.
meaning. So what is the let's dive into this a little bit. The disability check, and how does the check work? Who is eligible for it, and how helpful or limiting this can be?
Well, I can't speak on how everybody is eligible. I can speak in my situation. You officially become eligible when you turn 18, at least in my situation, because I was born with my disability. I was born with spastic cerebral palsy, and
Mhm.
it was diagnosed at 2. Um, 2 years old, not 2 o'clock today. We haven't hit 2 o'clock today. But my parents took me to the doctor because I wasn't sitting up and hitting the milestones that you are supposed to hit as a baby. And I was diagnosed approximately around the age of 2.
Mhm.
So when you turn 18, you go to the Social Security office and you apply. And now I'm in the system, so I get my check direct deposit, and it comes the way the government has set me up. The check for me comes on the 3rd of every month.
Okay. Can you briefly talk about the different, I don't know if they're organizations or the SSI, the SSDI?
Well, the system is very complex and very difficult to wade through. Most people don't realize if you have a disability check, you can't have more than $2,000 in savings at any one time. That's against the rules. If you have more than $2,000, they start looking at your finances and thinking that they should kick you off the program. So that is always a challenge because you can never really save. Um, um, it depends on how the government classifies you. I'm classified as, even though I pay taxes, I'm classified as a dependent adult child with a disability because I was born with my disability.
Mhm.
So every situation is different. You are allowed to own a car, and in some circumstances you are allowed to own a house, but that's basically the only assets you can have. You can't have stocks or bonds or CDs or anything like that. And like I said, every situation is different, so that's why it's so hard once you're in the system to get out of the system. My goal has always been to get out of the system and live above the poverty level and do better financially. But I mean, as of right now, it's the only way that I could live in California and be here. And California has one of the highest disability checks in terms of, because our the standard of living is so higher.
Yeah.
Wow. But it's still below the poverty level.
Yeah. We can,
but it's still way below the poverty level. So, when somebody says, "Oh, come do this with me," and I'm like, "No, it's not in my budget this month because, we haven't planned it out," or something like that. They're like, "Oh, it's only $20. It's not a big deal." I'm like, "Yeah, it is, because that $20 will be going for groceries."
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I heard right now, I just don't understand it, because it sounds to me like if you're applying for this check, which you should be entitled as someone with a disability, they're somehow limiting you, and they're limiting you a lot, which is why I just recently made a video that talked about money printing, right? And why during these days, actually, it's a good thing that you can't save money, because saving money is not going to do anything for you, because they're printing a lot, a crap load of money, and now that's going to lose its value. The more you print, the more it loses its value, right? So that it's kind of good that you're not saving it, but
you would like to have a little bit of a cushion in the bank.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
God forbid anything happens and you're screwed, and not in a fun way.
But the other thing that I was going to say, yes, you shouldn't save your money, but at the same time, you should invest your money. All right. And you're not even allowed to invest.
No, you're not.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people have a misconception. They think people on disability are just, lazy and not doing anything and not wanting to work. And I'm not going to say that doesn't exist. That might exist a small fraction. Mm-hmm. But overall, the people on disability really have challenges of some kind, whether they be intellectual or physical, that impede their daily life every day. And the more you try to get ahead, the more the system kind of cuts you down.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange place to be. And as somebody for myself, that is very fortunate enough to have the cognitive ability, if I'm beyond the point of working at Goodwill, which is most of the people with disabilities. I shouldn't say most, but a large majority of people with disabilities work at a place like Goodwill, and that's like beyond me. But by the same token, when I go out in the real world, prior to the COVID, it was harder to get a job. It's harder to get a job because they don't like the fact that I walk in with crutches, or that I wheel in with crutches. And it's like, and there's all these catch-22s within the company itself. They're like, I'm a person that uses voice recognition. And a lot of the companies will say, oh, you can bring your voice recognition in once you get the job. But while you're a temp, you're not allowed to use the voice recognition because we don't want it to mess up our computer setup, which is not the case, but that's what they say. So you're at a disadvantage when you start as a temp, because you can't work at your full capacity, because you keep running into all these barriers that you come along.
Yeah. No, That it looks like our environment is not universally designed. It's not accessible.
Yeah,
People are not accessible. Unfortunately, that can be said in many various areas
right.
of the human life. But this is why this show is here. This is why I created Mobility and Inclusion, to talk about these issues, and hopefully, not hopefully, and surely make a change um, towards the better, and towards the empowerment of all people. It doesn't matter whether you have a disability or not. When you apply for a job, that job should be accessible for everyone, and the best person should be employed, regardless of what's your outside physical appearance or physical abilities or disabilities. Can
Yeah.
you do the job or not? That should be the focus. So
And people with disabilities tend to be very loyal to companies once they get hired because it's so hard to find a job.
yeah, and
And
and and companies should also look into the incentives, even though I don't believe in incentivizing something, because I don't believe you need an incentive to hire a specific or a specific person, right? But now they have incentives. They should hire people with disabilities. So why not look into it, right? So that's something that companies should look into. Let's move on to, you said you have cerebral palsy, correct?
yes.
Okay. So what mobility devices have you used throughout your life, and what would you change, maybe like or dislike in them, and maybe what would you add to make your daily life more efficient?
Oh, wow. Cerebral palsy, for if your viewers don't know, is a central nervous system disorder. So it occurs primarily at birth, or like right around birth. There are other causes, but that was my scenario. So basically, the signals from my brain don't get transmitted correctly throughout my body. So I use, as you can see by the backdrop, I use a wheelchair. Even if I pretend like I'm flying like Supergirl, I use a wheelchair. I use two Canadian Forum crutches. I use voice recognition, has been a real game changer for me. I will voice recognition into my phone, email it to myself, and then when I'm feeling up to it, I'll sit in front of my computer and edit. And that's the way that I've done things. I drive with hand controls, which are very expensive and hard to, and cost money to maintain.
Mhm.
In terms of what I think, the more, it's a double-edged sword, because I would like to my apartment to be more computerized, but by the same token, if something were to happen and the internet goes out, then you're totally up a creek.
Yep,
It's
yep.
like if the internet and the television and the phone are on the same system and something goes wrong, you're really and in a standstill. But I mean, just being a voice recognition, I have an Alexa, that's helpful. Um, there are probably so many products that I don't know about that you're probably creating that I'm not even aware of. I have a grabber to pick things up when I drop them, and I believe that you're creating robotic arm, which that would be very helpful. That would be something that I would have to do a payment plan with because of my finances, but I think that would be very helpful, because it's always not, I always say it's always nice to have a pair of extra hands around.
Mhm.
So I don't care if it's robotic or not. I just would like to have the extra pair of hands around.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought it up, so I created Mobility and Inclusion, the podcast, to talk about these issues, raise these issues, and influence a change. And and that's what I want to do for the community. But how this podcast helps me is, it allows me to do research on what are the what are the products that are needed by the community of people with disabilities. And this is how this podcast helps me, and hopefully helps many other companies by listening to this podcast, uh, creating these equipment and products to make people with disabilities such as yourself more independent and more efficient in their daily lives. And currently I'm going to release my first prototype, which is a robotic arm, like you mentioned, that picks things up from the ground, and you can remotely automate that, or remotely work it. That way, you don't have to bend over, because we know. I found out that wheelchair users risk a fall when they try to, reach to grab something from the ground. So. Another guest of mine and a friend of mine who I interviewed on mobility and inclusion came to me with saying that, okay, I have this idea, and I had worked on this project before in my grad program, and I've shown him the concept. He said, "Yep, this is exactly what I was talking about, and it'll be really helpful to have this." And so that's what I'm working on right now. Hopefully, I'm going to release it soon, and I'll tell the audience more about it at a later time. And now, so what if I were to ask you to name a few tasks that you find yourself usually needing help with, like you depend on someone else to do for you? What would that task be?
Well, I'm really fortunate. I've learned how to be very independent, but I'm not going to lie. If I have help to do the laundry, that's a big game changer because I don't have a washer and dryer within my apartment unit. So it
Mhm.
has to be physically picked up and taken somewhere, whether it's the laundry room at the complex or whatever. That's a big thing. I also don't have a dishwasher, so doing dishes is a big thing. Um, like I said, I was very fortunate that I had a mother and a father that wanted me to be as independent as possible. So I've really learned over the years how to how to make things work because the reality is most of the time you're alone. I do have help, and that's been wonderful, but they're not always here when things happen at midnight or 2 in the morning, or
Mhm.
something goes awry.
Yeah, yeah.
um
Well, that's great. I mean, this is something else. Maybe companies who are working on mobility devices and helping individuals become more independent can look into these stuff, like doing laundry, doing the dishes. How can they help people such as yourself to make that make that process or task more easy, right?
yeah, it's the physicality of getting the laundry from point A to point B. It's
Yeah,
not necessarily turning on the washer and putting the quarters in and paying a lot of money to do the load of laundry because it's a coin operated
yeah.
situation. It's the fact that, getting it from your apartment all the way to the laundromat or all the way to the laundry room or whatever
Mhm.
that is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Great. So let's move on to our final question, and that'll be about
Is it like
your upcoming
Jeopardy?
projects. Yeah, the time passed quickly, right?
Yes. Is it like the final question in Jeopardy?
Well, we'll see. So I want you to tell us, the audience, what are your upcoming projects? Like anything new you are working on, please inform us.
Oh, well, I feel very fortunate. I'm working on a new project. It's a whole new concept for me. I'm working with Cityberg Studios and animator and editor by the name of Zach Wilson. And I'm working on it will be part animation and part live action, so I can incorporate my acting abilities and some of my sit down comedy abilities. And I came up with an idea for a cartoon, live action and part animation. It's called The Adventures of the and we're working on the pilot episode right now. But I can tell you that it will be called The Adventures of the Amazing Lady.
Wow, that's awesome. And how can people look at your content? Where should they go? How should they find you on the internet, on social media? Please, can you tell us about that too?
Oh, yes. The best way to find me is my website. My name is Dawn Grabowski, DAWNGRABOWSKI. So it's dawngrabowski.com. You could also find me on IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database. And in terms of social media, I'm currently on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Dawn Grabowski, and Instagram is Grabowski Dawn. So it's always my name. It's just a matter of whether it's my first name first or my last name, flip
Perfect,
it.
yeah.
On Instagram, it's flipped, but on all the other things, I'm investigating TikTok, but I haven't gotten there yet. So,
okay. Yeah, I will include every single social media channel that you mentioned, your website, when I repost this and launch it after producing it. I will, obviously include everything related to Dawn, how you can reach Dawn, and how you can view her work.
I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a content creator, I'm a speaker. Everything is being done right now over Zoom, but I think that even as the world opens up more, I think Zoom's going to stick around in terms of the speaking and in terms of some of the comedy, in the auditioning and stuff. I think Zoom is here to stay.
Oh, I think so too, and that's good that you're making that transition. I'm happy to hear that. And Dawn, thank you very much for being with us today, for giving us your time. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
It was a pleasure for the invite. Thank you. I'm always happy to talk about people that want to change the world, I feel, in a positive way, and get, a lot of people, with knowledge is power, and, through humor, we can educate, and through education, we can also educate. And I think a lot of your viewers may have been surprised by some of the things I said today.
Could be. I was surprised from at least a couple of things you said today. So I'm always learning. I constantly learn. So as with every guest, there's something new to learn. I wanted to say that you talked about how the cerebral palsy affects the nervous system, and how the nervous system translates information to different parts of your body, right? And recently, I developed a huge interest in studying the nervous system and knowing how it's functioned, because my ultimate goal is to help amputees with their prosthetics, and to attach their prosthetics to their leg or their arm, and still have it feel like a limb of their own, not something foreign attached to their body. So, and
that's fantastic.
That happens through the nervous system, through the interface between the nerves and the sensors. And I have developed a huge interest in that domain. So we'll see where that goes.
Well, I read a lot of books on the brain as well, and it's interesting how you can try to change the neural pathways by, I know it's possible because I've seen improvements in my own situation, but it's just a matter of, the technology and the science behind it. Not everyone knew that it was around, and now it's becoming more. Cranial sacrum therapy is becoming more, mainstream, and massage therapy and some of these other things that were considered, woo when I was a kid, and my mom knew nothing. My mom would read an article and she couldn't find anybody in the whole entire state that was able to help. And
Yeah.
now those things are mainstream. So I know in terms of changing the neural pathways, it takes work, but I feel like it is possible.
Oh, absolutely, it is possible. We're just not in the frequency at which that operates on. So once we get there, I think we'll make great waves.
It will be another game changer.
Yep, absolutely.
Just
So
like you and me.
yeah, that always, always onward and upward.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Don. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next
Thank
time.
you.
Until then, look into yourself and find out what are your limiting beliefs. Suspend it and shoot for greatness because I believe in you.